All right, guys, I'm finally going to talk about one of my favorite array methods, reduce. Now, reduce is a lot more than just using it to sum on some random numbers in an array or subtract some random numbers. You can also do some cool manipulations. But today, I really want to talk about how the method actually works. What is the initial value? What's the current value? Should you have a second argument or not, right? All right, let's talk about this. Let's use these random numbers right here. I will paste in this. Now, I took this array, right, and I called the reduce method on it. The reduce method takes in two arguments. The first argument is a function that you can define, right? That's this part right here, right? That's its first argument. Its second argument is something called the initial value that you can pass in. It's optional, and I'll talk about why later on. So right now, I passed in 0 as my initial value. Now, inside that function that you wrote, you have access to three things. You have access to the initial value. That's your second argument right here. You have access to the current value. That's whatever you're currently iterating through using the reduce method, right? Reduce will loop through an array, right? And this whole object will be its current value. And you also have access to the index. Okay, let's take a look on the right. Current index 0. We're in our first loop, right? What is our initial value? Our initial value is 0. That matches what we put right here. What if we change this to 99? Our initial value is 99. What if we change this to an object? It's an object. An array? An array. A boolean? A boolean. This is what makes reduce so flexible and powerful, right? Because we can put anything as our initial value. And I'll go deeper in just a little bit. Okay, so now if we look at our current value, it says 9, right? Because if we look at our numbers array, at index 0, right, its current value is 9. At index 1, its current value is 1. Now, if you look at the console.logs again, the first loop, initial value is 0, but y is second and so on, undefined. Well, that's how reduce works. The first loop is whatever you tell it to be, but from then on, it's whatever you return from your first loop, right? So right here, I'm going to return. What am I going to return? I'm going to return initial, init, plus current value. Now, and then I console.log the result at the end. You see the 20, that's the sum of all of these numbers. But let's break down this console.log, right? Just the initial part. If you look at this, the first time the initial is 0, but the second time it's 9. Why is that? Because of this line right here. When it first runs, it takes the initial 0 plus the current value right here, 9, and then that 9 is now its initial value for the second loop. So the cool thing about reduce is that every time it loops, it remembers what it was previously and it can add on or subtract on. Okay, and this works for numbers. This means you can also mutate objects and arrays and even functions this way. Okay, so reduce is a lot more useful than people think it is. Okay, so now we have 20, right? What if, let's take a look at this. What if instead of 0, we don't put anything? Well, our total is still 0, is still 20, right? Because with the 0, we're just adding 0 to the sum, which doesn't change anything. But if you take a look at this, you see that reduce itself does not start off with the 0 index anymore. It starts off with index 1. So once again, if you do not provide a second argument to the reduce method, its loop will start at index 1. And its initial value will just be whatever the first value of your array is. Let's say instead of 9, I'm going to change it to 800. And now you're going to see that the initial value is now 800. Okay? So if you don't provide anything, it starts at index 1, and your initial value will be the first value in your array, and your current value will be your second index. Okay? And then it'll still loop on and on. Okay, so we looked at how it affects numbers. Let's take a look at some more interesting cases for reduce.